The Whispering Wards. Once upon a time, in a forgotten corner of the town, there stood a decrepit, abandoned hospital. Its decaying walls echoed with ghostly whispers that sent shivers down the spines of those brave enough to venture inside. The locals called it the Whispering Wards, a name that struck fear into the hearts of anyone who heard it. On a chilly autumn night, a group of thrill-seeking teenagers gathered near the hospital's crumbling entrance. There were 4 of them: Jake, the bold and fearless leader; Sarah, the skeptical one who laughed off ghost stories; Tim, the nervous newbie who had never experienced anything like this; and Mike, the quiet one who went along with the others out of peer pressure. "Come on, guys," Jake urged, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We've all heard the rumors about this place. They say it's haunted, and I don't believe in ghosts. Let's spend the night here and prove everyone wrong." Sarah rolled her eyes but followed Jake inside, while Tim hesitated for a moment before reluctantly tagging along. As they ventured deeper into the hospital, the temperature dropped suddenly, sending a chill down their spines. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. The group explored the hospital's dark corridors, laughing nervously to mask their fear. But as the night grew darker, they began to hear it, the haunting whispers that echoed through the halls. Sarah couldn't help but shiver. "Okay, Jake, maybe this place is a little creepier than I thought." Jake chuckled. "Don't worry, Sarah. It's just the wind or something. Let's keep going." Ignoring the whispers that seemed to grow louder with every step, they finally stumbled upon a hidden ward tucked away in the depths of the hospital. The door creaked open with a spine-chilling groan, revealing a room filled with dusty medical equipment and decrepit beds. "This place gives me the creeps," Tim mumbled, his voice barely audible over the relentless whispers that filled the air. Jake, always the adventurer, led them further into the ward. As they explored the room, they noticed ghostly figures in medical attire flickering in and out of existence. The apparitions seemed to be going about their business as if they were unaware of the living intruders. Sarah gasped, her disbelief shaken to its core. "Jake, do you see that? There are people, ghosts, in here." Jake hesitated for a moment before replying. "They're probably just illusions, Sarah. Old memories lingering in the air. Nothing to be scared of." But Tim, who was already on edge, couldn't take it anymore. "I've had enough, guys. Let's get out of here." As they turned to leave, a sudden gust of cold air slammed the door shut behind them, trapping them inside the haunted ward. Panic set in as they struggled to open the door, but it refused to budge. The whispers grew louder, more sinister, as if the spirits of the past patients were trying to communicate something. The apparitions grew more agitated, and one of them pointed towards an old medical chart on the wall. Jake, his bravado fading fast, took a trembling step towards the chart. It revealed the story of a tragic experiment gone wrong, one that had claimed the lives of countless patients. The spirits were trying to tell them something, but it was too late to escape now. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out completely. In the pitch-black darkness, they could hear the whispering all around them, circling like vultures. Then they felt it, a cold, clammy hand brushing against their faces, their arms, their legs. An unseen entity, with a malevolent presence, was in the room with them. Panic consumed them as they blindly fumbled for the door, but it remained sealed shut. In the darkness, they could barely make out the apparitions now, grotesque, twisted forms of the patients who had suffered here. The spirits seemed tormented and angry, their mournful cries blending with the haunting whispers. Jake shouted, "We have to get out of here. On the count of 3, we'll charge the door together." They braced themselves, their hearts pounding in their chests, and then, with all their strength, they lunged towards the door. Miraculously, it swung open, and they tumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. The whispers faded as they retreated from the hidden ward. They ran through the hospital's crumbling corridors, the malevolent entity chasing them every step of the way. It was as if the ghosts were determined to make them pay for intruding on their torment. Finally, they burst out of the hospital, gasping for breath in the cool night air. They had escaped, but they knew they had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The danger of their curiosity had become painfully clear, and the weight of the hospital's haunting history would stay with them forever. As they stood there, trembling and shaken, the hospital seemed to loom over them like a malevolent presence, whispering its dark secrets into the night. The Whispering Wards had claimed another group of curious souls, leaving them forever haunted by the chilling events of that fateful night. Echoes of the Forgotten. In the dead of night, under a pale, eerie moon, the haunted hospital stood as a towering monolith of decay. Dr. Emily Hart, a seasoned paranormal investigator, and her skeptical assistant, Mark, ventured into its depths, their footsteps echoing ominously through the dilapidated psychiatric wing. The air grew thick and suffocating as they entered the wing. The walls, once white, were now stained with time and despair. Creepy children's toys lay scattered on the cracked linoleum floor, a chilling reminder of the lives that had once been confined here. Mark couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Emily, are you sure about this? It feels like we're intruding on something unnatural." Emily's eyes glinted with determination. "Mark, this place holds dark secrets, and we're here to uncover them. We need evidence to prove the existence of the paranormal. And this wing is where the most unsettling stories originate." Their flashlight beams danced across the peeling wallpaper as they explored the ward. Emily's keen eyes fell upon a dusty filing cabinet, its drawers filled with old patient records. She began to sift through them, her fingers trembling with anticipation. As she read through the records, Emily's face twisted in horror. "Mark, these records. They detail unethical experiments conducted on vulnerable patients. The doctors here used them as guinea pigs, subjecting them to unspeakable horrors." Mark's skepticism wavered as he saw the despair etched into Emily's face. "But how do we prove any of this is real? It's just old paperwork." Before Emily could respond, a sudden, bone-chilling scream pierced the silence. The two investigators froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The scream echoed through the hallways, growing louder and more agonizing with each passing moment. Mark's voice quivered. "That can't be real, right? It's just a trick of the mind." But Emily knew better. The scream was followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps, and as they turned, they witnessed a ghostly reenactment of the experiments. Transparent figures, tormented souls from the past, writhed in agony as they were subjected to the horrors they had endured in life. One figure, a young girl with hollow eyes, clutched a tattered teddy bear to her chest, her tears invisible yet heart-wrenchingly real. Emily and Mark could only watch in horror as the tragic scene played out before them. As the reenactment faded, a chilling voice whispered through the air, "Help us, save us." Emily took a deep breath, her resolve unwavering. "We need to find out more, Mark. We must confront the source of this torment." They continued to explore the wing, guided by the echoes of forgotten pain. The feeling of being watched grew more intense with every step, and the darkness seemed to close in on them. In a small, dimly lit room, they stumbled upon a hidden laboratory. The room reeked of chemicals, and on a rusted operating table lay the remains of a once human subject, their body mutilated beyond recognition. A ghostly figure, a former doctor, emerged from the shadows, his eyes filled with remorse and agony. "You should not be here," the spectral doctor whispered, his voice laden with sorrow. "I was blinded by ambition and curiosity, and now I am condemned to suffer alongside those I wronged." Emily stepped forward, her voice compassionate. "We're here to bear witness, to bring your story to light." The ghostly doctor, his form flickering like a dying candle, nodded. "Tell the world what happened here. Let them know the pain that lingers within these walls." As the specter faded away, a sense of closure washed over the investigators. They had unearthed the horrors of the past, the echoes of the forgotten. With heavy hearts, they left the haunted psychiatric wing, vowing to shed light on the dark secrets buried within the hospital's decaying walls. The moon cast a final, mournful glow upon the hospital as Emily and Mark made their way out, their footsteps lighter, their mission accomplished. The pain of the past would haunt them, but they had given a voice to the tormented souls, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. The Unseen Malady. In the dim light of a waning moon, the team of urban explorers stood before the ominous doors of the long-abandoned infectious disease ward. The hospital had been left to crumble, forgotten by time, but their curiosity led them to this forsaken place. Alex, the fearless leader, was the first to push open the creaking doors. His heart raced as he stepped into the decaying ward, followed by Lily, the tech-savvy member with her camera ready, and Ethan, the historian who carried the weight of the past on his shoulders. The air inside the ward was thick with a palpable sense of dread. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the once white tiles were now stained and cracked. As they ventured deeper, old medical equipment sat like relics of a bygone era, eerily untouched by time. A sense of unease settled upon the team. Ethan's voice trembled as he read the faded words scrawled on the walls. "The plague that knows no name." He looked back at his companions. This place, it was a nightmare for those who were quarantined here. Lily aimed her camera at the cryptic writing. Let's document everything. We might uncover something that history forgot. As they explored the ward, the team began to feel the weight of the past pressing down on them. Hallucinations danced at the corners of their vision, ghostly figures in tattered hospital gowns that vanished when they tried to focus on them. Alex, the bravest of them all, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He whispered, "Did you guys see that? Those figures?" Ethan tried to rationalize it. Tricks of the light, perhaps. Our minds are playing tricks on us. But as they ventured further, Lily's camera picked up eerie recordings, whispers, desperate pleas, and chilling laughter that echoed through the empty corridors. The images on her camera screen were equally unsettling, showing shadowy figures that seemed to grow more corporeal with each passing moment. Panic began to seep in as the team realized that something insidious was at play. It was then that the symptoms began to manifest. Ethan's skin turned ashen, covered in a rash that seemed to move like a living entity. Lily felt her vision blur, as if the world around her was melting into a nightmarish dreamscape. Alex, too, felt his strength wane as he struggled to breathe. Desperation set in as they realized they were trapped in the infectious disease ward, and they had become afflicted by an unknown malady. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. Ethan's voice quivered as he spoke. "We need to find a cure, figure out what's happening here." As they searched for answers, they discovered mysterious writings on the walls, notes left behind by the past inhabitants of this dreaded ward. The writings spoke of a contagion that defied science, a disease that was not of this world. The more they read, the more they realized that their affliction was supernatural in nature. Alex's vision blurred even further, and he could hear the ghostly figures whispering to him, urging him to join them. He fought against the temptation, knowing that he had to stay grounded in reality. Lily stumbled upon a diary belonging to a former nurse who had worked in the ward. The diary chronicled her descent into madness as she witnessed the horrors of the disease. She had tried to find a cure, a way to save the patients, but her efforts had been in vain. As the team delved deeper into the diary, they realized that the disease was tied to a malevolent entity that had taken residence in the ward. It fed on the fear and suffering of those who had been quarantined, perpetuating its own existence. Ethan's voice was shaky as he read the final entry. "We have to confront this entity, find a way to break the cycle." With their strength fading and their symptoms worsening, they made their way to the heart of the ward. There, in a room filled with the echoes of anguish, they confronted the malevolent entity. The room trembled as they challenged the entity, demanding answers and a cure. In a burst of spectral energy, the entity revealed itself, a swirling vortex of darkness, a manifestation of the unseen malady that had plagued the ward for centuries. With every ounce of their remaining strength, the team fought back, forcing the entity to relinquish its hold on them. The room erupted in blinding light, and the entity let out a bone-chilling scream before dissipating into nothingness. As the light faded, the team found themselves standing in the now deserted infectious disease ward, their symptoms miraculously gone. They had faced a supernatural malady, conquered it, and uncovered the horrors of a bygone era. With a newfound respect for the blurred lines between science and the supernatural, they left the ward, determined to share their harrowing experience with the world. The unseen malady may have plagued the past, but they had faced it and emerged victorious, a testament to their courage and resilience in the face of the unknown. Shadows of the Surgeon. Clara, a horror writer in search of inspiration, and her friend Dan, a history buff with a penchant for the macabre, found themselves standing outside the foreboding doors of the hospital's long-abandoned surgery wing. The air was thick with anticipation as they ventured into the darkness, armed with nothing but their curiosity. As they stepped into the surgery wing, the world around them seemed to change. The once sterile and pristine halls were now dank and foreboding, with bloodstains that refused to be scrubbed away, haunting reminders of the horrors that had transpired within. Clara shivered, her imagination running wild. "Dan, this place is perfect for my next horror novel." The shadows seemed to have stories of their own. Dan nodded, his eyes scanning the eerie surroundings. "Let's explore. Maybe we'll uncover some dark history that will fuel your creativity." They moved further into the surgery wing, their footsteps echoing ominously through the empty corridors. The abandoned operating rooms were like portals to a grisly past, with rusted surgical tools laid out as if waiting for the next procedure. As they explored, a chilling sensation settled over them. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew heavy with an unspoken presence. Flora turned to Dan, her voice trembling. "Did you feel that? It's like we're being watched." Dan's face paled as he noticed the operating rooms coming to life with spectral activity. Phantom surgeries unfolded before their eyes, as ghostly surgeons in blood-stained gowns and masks operated on translucent patients, their anguished cries echoing through the corridors. Flora's heart pounded, her breath catching in her throat. This can't be real, Dan. It's like we've stepped into a nightmare." Dan struggled to find an explanation. "Maybe it's a residual haunting, replaying the horrors of the past. We should document this. It's an incredible discovery." But as they continued to watch, the ghostly surgeon noticed their presence. He turned toward them, his eyes hollow voids filled with malevolence. With a spectral hand, he beckoned them closer. Flora's voice quivered. "Dan, we need to go. This isn't right." But it was too late. The ghostly surgeon's grip tightened, and they were pulled into a nightmarish vision of the past. They stood in an operating room, surrounded by the chilling presence of the surgeon and his assistants. The surgeon, his voice cold and detached, began to describe his gruesome procedures, the experimentation, the pain, and the lives he had taken in the name of progress. Flora and Dan watched in horror as the surgeon operated on a patient who writhed in agony, unable to escape the nightmare. As the vision unfolded, Clara realized the truth. This surgeon, he was a monster. He conducted unethical experiments, torturing innocent patients. Dan clenched his fists, anger boiling within him. "We have to find a way out of this nightmare. We can't let his malevolence consume us." With every ounce of their will, Clara and Dan fought against the ghostly surgeon's grip. The vision began to waver, and they found themselves back in the abandoned surgery wing, their bodies trembling with fear. The ghostly surgeon, enraged by their intrusion, materialized before them. He lunged at them, his spectral scalpel poised to strike. Clara and Dan barely managed to dodge the deadly blow, their hearts pounding in terror. As they fled from the vengeful spirit, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber, a repository of the surgeon's dark secrets. It was filled with journals detailing his heinous experiments, photographs of his victims, and preserved organs that had been taken from countless patients. Clara's voice trembled as she read the surgeon's words. He was obsessed with pushing the boundaries of medicine, without any regard for human life. "We need to expose his crimes." With newfound determination, they made their way to the exit, desperate to escape the malevolent surgeon's grasp, but he pursued them relentlessly, his ghostly form contorted with rage. In a final confrontation, Clara and Dan confronted the surgeon, revealing the evidence of his crimes to the world. The malevolent spirit let out an agonized wail, his form dissipating into nothingness. His reign of terror finally ended. As Clara and Dan left the haunted surgery wing, they knew they had uncovered a dark chapter of history, one that would inspire Clara's next horror novel. The shadows of the surgeon's crimes had been brought to light, a testament to the enduring search for truth, even in the face of unimaginable horrors. The last shift. David had been the night guard at the hospital for years. He was used to the eerie silence that permeated the emergency department during the late hours, broken only by the occasional beeping of monitors. But lately, something had changed. During his shifts, David began to experience unexplainable events. The lights flickered mysteriously, and he could hear the sounds of a busy hospital, as if the place was alive and bustling with patients and staff, despite the empty beds and deserted corridors. One night, as David was making his rounds, he heard the distant sound of hurried footsteps and hushed voices. He followed the sounds, his heart pounding in his chest. The voices grew louder as he approached one of the examination rooms. When he pushed the door open, he couldn't believe his eyes. The room, which should have been empty, was filled with people in distress. Nurses rushed around, attending to patients on gurneys, and doctors barked orders. It was as if he had stepped into the past, a nightmarish reenactment of a busy shift. David's voice trembled as he tried to speak to one of the nurses, but she didn't even acknowledge his presence. She continued her work, seemingly unaware of him. It was as if he were a ghost in his own hospital. He watched in horror as the events unfolded. It was clear that something terrible had happened. Patients were rushed into surgery, their conditions critical. Panic hung in the air as the hospital staff worked tirelessly to save lives. As David moved through the chaotic scene, he spotted a figure in a doctor's coat, standing at the center of it all. The doctor was different from the others. He had an air of authority, his face etched with a mix of determination and guilt. David approached the mysterious doctor, his voice trembling as he spoke. "What happened here? Why are you doing this?" The doctor turned to him, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I failed them. I made a terrible mistake, and it cost them their lives. I can never make amends." David tried to grasp the situation, but it was slipping through his fingers like smoke. He watched helplessly as the doctor continued to perform surgery after surgery, each ending in tragedy. As the night wore on, David's fear grew. He couldn't escape the never-ending cycle of anguish and despair that had trapped him in this nightmarish reenactment. The hospital's flickering lights seemed to mock him, and the sounds of suffering echoed in his ears. Desperate for answers, David delved deeper into the past. He discovered remnants of the last shift, medical records, patient charts, and notes left by the staff who had been present that fateful night. The details were chilling, confirming the tragic incident that had occurred during the hospital's last operating night. David realized that he needed to confront the truth, to break the cycle that had ensnared him. He returned to the examination room, determined to face the mysterious doctor and uncover the full story. As he entered the room, the doctor was there once again, performing surgery on a patient. But this time, David could see the entire scene more clearly. The patient's life was slipping away, and the doctor's hands were shaking with guilt. David's voice quivered as he spoke to the doctor. "You have to let go. You can't change the past." The doctor looked at David, his eyes filled with anguish. "I know, but I can't forgive myself for what I've done." With those words, the room seemed to freeze in time, and the hospital's flickering lights grew brighter. David watched as the ghostly figures of the hospital staff and patients faded away, their presence dissipating into the empty room. David was left standing alone, the weight of the past lifted from his shoulders. The hospital's emergency department had returned to its usual, empty state, the mysterious events of the past no longer haunting him. As the sun began to rise, David knew he had finally found closure. The last shift, with its tragic incident frozen in time, had come to an end. He would never forget what he had witnessed, but he had also found a way to let go of the past, leaving behind the haunting echoes of that fateful night. Corridors of the Lost. Mia and Leo stood at the entrance of the abandoned hospital, their curiosity outweighing the unease that settled in the pit of their stomachs. Mia, a photographer with a penchant for the eerie, and Leo, a folklore enthusiast, had always been drawn to the supernatural, and the hospital's labyrinthine corridors promised an adventure unlike any they had experienced before. As they ventured deeper into the hospital, the world around them seemed to shift and warp. Doors led to unexpected places, and hallways stretched on endlessly. The hospital's layout seemed to change, twisting and distorting reality. Mia tried to keep her composure, but her camera trembled in her hands. "This place is like a maze. It's disorienting." Leo nodded, his eyes scanning the shifting corridors. "It's as if the hospital itself is trying to keep us trapped." The unsettling feeling of being watched settled upon them, and they heard the sound of footsteps echoing behind them, always just out of sight. Mia and Leo quickened their pace, their hearts pounding with fear. They encountered strange mirrors that lined the walls, each reflecting a different scene: a bustling hospital, a room filled with patients, and even their own terrified faces distorted in agony. The mirrors seemed to offer glimpses into alternate realities, and Mia and Leo couldn't help but feel that they were not alone in this disorienting place. As they turned a corner, they stumbled upon a group of ghostly patients. These lost souls were dressed in outdated hospital gowns, their eyes vacant, as if they were stuck in a perpetual state of confusion. They mumbled incomprehensible words and reached out for Mia and Leo, their bony fingers cold to the touch. Mia's voice quivered as she spoke to one of the ghostly patients. "Can you help us find a way out of here?" The patient's eyes held a spark of recognition, and he pointed down a corridor, his voice barely audible as he whispered, "Follow the sound of the forgotten." With a sense of urgency, Mia and Leo followed the faint sound of distant footsteps, hoping it would lead them to an escape. But the corridors seemed to shift and twist, making it impossible to maintain their bearings. Hours turned into an eternity as they wandered through the endless corridors, their hope dwindling with each passing moment. The footsteps behind them grew louder, an ominous presence that seemed to be closing in. Leo's voice quivered as he spoke. "Mia, we're trapped in this nightmare. We need to find a way out before it's too late." Mia nodded, her determination resolute. We have to trust the words of the ghostly patient. Follow the sound of the forgotten. They continued to follow the faint sound, their footsteps echoing through the disorienting labyrinth. As they turned another corner, they stumbled upon an old radio that crackled to life, emitting static and an eerie melody. Leo recognized the tune. It was an old folk song passed down through generations. He whispered, "This is it. This is the sound of the forgotten." They followed the melody, their senses heightened as they pushed forward, the relentless footsteps behind them growing closer. They reached a seemingly dead-end corridor, and Mia noticed an old, dusty grate on the floor. With a final burst of adrenaline, they lifted the grate, revealing a hidden passage below. Without hesitation, Mia and Leo descended into the darkness, leaving the shifting corridors behind. As they crawled through the narrow tunnel, they could hear the footsteps growing distant, fading into the abyss. Finally, they emerged into the open air, gasping for breath as they found themselves outside the hospital. The world seemed to return to normal, and the disorienting corridors were nothing but a distant, haunting memory. Mia and Leo knew they had escaped a place that defied explanation, a labyrinth of fear and confusion. They had ventured into the corridors of the lost and emerged with a chilling tale of the supernatural, one that would stay with them forever. The hospital's secrets remained buried within its shifting walls, and they were thankful to have escaped its clutches, no longer lost in its disorienting maze. The maternity ward's lament. The abandoned maternity ward of the hospital stood like a forgotten relic, its hallways shrouded in darkness. For Emma and Tom, it was the perfect place to debunk the ghost stories that had circulated for years. They were skeptics, armed with cameras and flashlights, determined to prove that the tales of the haunted maternity ward were nothing more than superstitions. As they ventured further into the ward, their footsteps echoed ominously through the empty corridors. The air was heavy with a sense of melancholy, as if the very walls of the maternity ward held a sorrowful secret. Emma chuckled nervously. "I can't believe we're doing this, Tom. Ghost stories in a maternity ward. It's ridiculous." Tom grinned, his skepticism unwavering. "It's all just in people's heads, Em. We'll capture some spooky footage, have a laugh, and put an end to these rumors." But as they explored deeper into the ward, their laughter faded. They began to hear the soft strains of a lullaby, a haunting melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The hair on the back of their necks stood on end. Emma's voice trembled. "Do you hear that, Tom?" He nodded, his eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor. "It's probably just the wind, or maybe someone left a music box behind." But the lullaby continued, growing louder and more mournful. Emma and Tom followed the haunting melody, drawn deeper into the ward. As they turned a corner, they stumbled upon an apparition, a mother cradling a newborn baby in her arms, her eyes filled with both love and despair. Tom's voice quivered as he spoke. "Emma, do you see that?" Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. It's a ghost, Tom." The mother and baby seemed to exist in their own world, oblivious to Emma and Tom's presence. The mother hummed the lullaby, her eyes fixed on her infant with a love that transcended time. The baby, a mere phantom, cooed softly in response. As Emma and Tom watched in awe, the mother's eyes met theirs, and they could see the pain of loss etched in her gaze. The lullaby turned even more mournful, and the apparition slowly faded away, leaving behind a palpable sense of sorrow. Tom's voice was hushed. "That was heartbreaking. It's like she's trapped here, reliving her pain over and over." Determined to uncover the truth, they delved into the ward's history. They discovered that decades ago, the maternity ward had been plagued by a string of tragedies. Mothers and babies lost during childbirth, their lives cut short before they could truly begin. Emma's voice quivered as she read the old records. "It's a story of heartbreak and loss, Tom. So many lives touched by tragedy." As they continued their exploration, they heard the phantom cries of babies, echoing through the empty cribs. The soft glow of unseen lights filled the room, casting an ethereal and sorrowful ambience. They even felt gentle, unseen touches as if the spirits were reaching out to them. The further they ventured into the maternity ward, the more apparitions they encountered, mothers cradling their infants, their faces filled with love and longing. It was as if the maternity ward had become a sanctuary for the spirits of those who had been taken too soon. Emma and Tom could feel the weight of their presence, the enduring bond between mother and child that transcended death. They realized that their initial skepticism had been misplaced, and they were witnessing something profound and inexplicable. The haunting lullaby continued to play in the background, a mournful melody that seemed to encompass the collective grief of the lost mothers. Emma and Tom couldn't help but feel the immense sadness that permeated the ward. In a final room, they discovered a faded photograph, a group of smiling nurses and expectant mothers, their faces filled with hope. It was a stark contrast to the melancholy that now haunted the maternity ward. As they left the abandoned ward, Emma and Tom felt a deep sense of sadness and empathy for the spirits they had encountered. The maternity ward's lament was a haunting reminder of the pain of loss and the enduring bond between mother and child, a story that would stay with them forever. As they shared their findings with others, they hoped to bring closure to the lost souls who still lingered in the maternity ward, their presence a testament to the enduring power of love and the sorrow of lives cut short. The phantom prescriptions. The old hospital's pharmacy had long been abandoned, its shelves of medications gathering dust. For college students Rachel and Kyle, it was an unlikely place to search for a thesis topic in pharmacology. But they had heard whispers of mysterious prescriptions and a locked vault, and their curiosity got the best of them. The air in the pharmacy was thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten remedies. Ancient medical books lay scattered on the countertops, their pages yellowed with time. Rachel and Kyle felt a shiver run down their spines as they stepped further into the room. Kyle chuckled nervously. "I can't believe we're doing this, Rachel. Ghost stories about prescriptions. It sounds ridiculous." Rachel grinned, her eyes scanning the old pharmacy. "It's a perfect blend of history and the paranormal. We might find something unique for our thesis." As they explored the pharmacy, their attention was drawn to a locked vault in the corner. It was said to hold the most secretive and valuable prescriptions, the ones that had been locked away for centuries. Rachel and Kyle exchanged eager glances and set about finding a way to unlock it. After hours of research, they discovered an ancient key hidden within one of the medical books. As they approached the vault, their excitement was palpable. Rachel inserted the key, and with a creaking sound, the vault door swung open, revealing rows of vials containing mysterious glowing substances. Kyle's voice trembled with excitement. "This is it, Rachel. The secret prescriptions." As they examined the vials, they noticed that each one had a label with a date, a patient's name, and a list of ingredients. It was as if the prescriptions were a window into the past, a record of long-forgotten treatments. Rachel's eyes widened as she read one of the prescriptions. "This one, it's for a disease that hasn't been seen in over a century. And the ingredients, they're completely unknown to modern medicine." Kyle took a closer look. "This could be our breakthrough. We need to decipher these prescriptions and recreate the medicine." As they worked tirelessly to decipher the ancient texts, strange things began to happen in the pharmacy. The room filled with a soft, ethereal glow, and the shelves of vials seemed to rearrange themselves. It was as if they were being guided by an unseen force. One night, as they were deep in their research, a spectral figure appeared before them, a pharmacist in old-fashioned attire, his face kind but filled with sadness. He motioned for them to follow and led them to an old medical book. Rachel's voice was hushed. "Is this a ghost?" Kyle nodded, his awestruck gaze fixed on the apparition. "It seems so, but he's trying to show us something." The ghostly pharmacist pointed to a page in the book, revealing a formula that matched one of the prescriptions they had discovered. It was a recipe for a cure, a treatment for the long-forgotten disease. With the ghostly guidance, Rachel and Kyle set to work, carefully recreating the medicine. They followed the ancient recipe, mixing ingredients that were unknown to modern science. The process was filled with uncertainty, but they were determined to uncover the secrets of the past. As they finally produced the medicine, the spectral pharmacist nodded in approval, his form glowing brighter before slowly fading away. It was as if he had found peace, knowing that his knowledge had been passed down to a new generation. Rachel and Kyle were left with the vials of the medicine, a tangible connection to the past and a potential breakthrough in pharmacology. They realized that they had uncovered not only a cure for a long-forgotten disease but also the intersection of science and the supernatural. With their research complete, they shared their findings with the world, hoping to bring a long-lost treatment back to life. The pharmacy had held the secrets of the past, and Rachel and Kyle had unlocked them with the help of a spectral pharmacist. As they left the old hospital behind, they knew they had embarked on a journey that had taken them beyond the realm of modern science, into the mysteries of the past and the power of the paranormal. The phantom prescriptions had become their thesis, a testament to the enduring quest for knowledge and the bonds that span generations. The operating theater's Encore. Laura and James were seasoned theater actors, always in search of the perfect setting for their performances. When they heard about the old hospital's main operating theater, steeped in history and horror, they couldn't resist the allure of its eerie atmosphere. The theater had been abandoned for years, its walls echoing with the whispers of past surgeries and the agonized cries of patients. It was a place that had seen both triumph and tragedy, and Laura and James saw it as the perfect backdrop for their next play. As they stepped onto the dimly lit stage, they felt a sense of excitement and unease. The atmosphere was theatrical and dramatic, with a blend of horror and tragedy that seemed to hang in the air. The old wooden seats were empty, but they imagined a ghostly audience watching their every move. James grinned, his voice filled with anticipation. "Laura, can you imagine the impact of our play in this place? It's like stepping into history." Laura nodded, her eyes scanning the stage. "It's perfect, James. Let's give them a performance they'll never forget." As they began their rehearsal, they noticed something strange. The stage props, once mere replicas of medical tools, began to take on a life of their own. The wooden tables transformed into actual operating tables, complete with rusted surgical instruments. The costumes shifted from period theatrical attire to the attire of surgeons from a bygone era. Laura's voice trembled as she spoke. "James, something's not right. These props, they're real." Before they could react, the lights above them flickered, and the audience seats were no longer empty. They were filled with ghostly spectators, their eyes fixed on the stage. The atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation, and the air seemed to thicken with a sense of foreboding. Ignoring the strange occurrences, Laura and James continued their rehearsal, their voices filled with emotion as they delved into their characters. The play they had written was a tragic one, centered around a botched surgery that had taken place in the very theater they now stood in. As they reached the climax of the performance, something inexplicable happened. The stage seemed to come alive, and the very walls of the theater began to resonate with the echoes of the past. The audience gasped as they witnessed a ghostly reenactment of the tragic surgery, with Laura and James at the center of it all. Laura's voice quivered as she played the role of the patient, her body laid out on the operating table. James, in the role of the surgeon, held a scalpel in his trembling hand. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and the audience of specters watched in rapt attention. But as the surgery unfolded, it became clear that they were not merely performing a play. The surgical instruments were real, and James made a real incision on Laura's abdomen. Blood spilled onto the operating table, and the pain on Laura's face was all too real. Panic coursed through their veins as they realized the horrifying truth. They were trapped in a ghostly reenactment of the past, reliving the tragic surgery that had taken place in the theater years ago. Desperate to break free from the haunting performance, Laura and James struggled to stay in character, hoping to reach the conclusion of the surgery. The audience of ghostly spectators watched in silence, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and sadness. As James sewed up the incision, the lights above them flickered once more, and the atmosphere in the theater changed. The ghostly audience began to fade away, their presence dissipating into the empty seats. Laura and James were left alone on the stage, their hearts pounding and their bodies covered in sweat and blood. The props and costumes returned to their theatrical forms, and the stage reverted to its abandoned state. They realized that they had become part of the hospital's history, trapped in a reenactment of a tragic event that had taken place long ago. The operating theater's encore had become a performance they would never forget, a chilling reminder of the thin line between reality and performance. As they left the theater, they knew they had experienced something beyond the realm of the ordinary. The hospital's haunted past had become a part of their own history, and the memory of that fateful rehearsal would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The nurse's secret. Julie had always been fascinated by her grandmother Anna's mysterious past. Anna had worked as a nurse at the old hospital before it closed its doors to the public. The stories Julie had heard hinted at a history filled with both courage and secrets. One day, while helping Anna clean her attic, Julie stumbled upon an old, dust-covered diary. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the words were written in a delicate script that Julie recognized as her grandmother's. Curiosity getting the best of her, she opened the diary and began to read. As she read through the diary, Julie discovered that it was filled with accounts of Anna's time at the hospital. Anna had been a dedicated and compassionate nurse, but there were entries that hinted at something more sinister: strange occurrences, unexplained deaths, and a pervasive sense of fear that seemed to hang in the air. One entry, in particular, caught Julie's attention. It mentioned a hidden room in the hospital, a room that held unspeakable horrors. Julie's heart raced as she realized that the diary might hold the key to her grandmother's secret past. Determined to uncover the truth, Julie confronted Anna with the diary. Her grandmother's eyes widened in surprise, and then she sighed, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Anna agreed to take Julie to the old hospital, where she could finally reveal her secrets. As they entered the abandoned hospital, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The once bustling corridors were now empty and desolate. Anna led Julie to the nursing station, where she had spent countless hours caring for patients. Julie couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she looked around the nursing station. The walls seemed to echo with the distant sobbing of patients long gone, and shadowy figures in nursing uniforms appeared to move in the corners of her vision. Anna's voice was filled with regret as she spoke. "Julie, I need to show you something that has haunted me for years." They followed Anna down a dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing through the empty wards. Julie couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and the air grew colder as they approached their destination. Anna stopped before a nondescript door and unlocked it with a trembling hand. She pushed the door open, revealing a hidden room. The room was small and windowless, its walls covered in faded wallpaper. But what caught Julie's attention were the medical instruments that hung from the ceiling, instruments that looked more like torture devices than tools of healing. Anna's voice quivered as she began to speak. This room, it was a place of unspeakable horrors. Patients were brought here, and they never left. The doctors, they performed experiments that went terribly wrong. Julie's heart ached as she looked around the room, her mind trying to comprehend the horrors that had taken place there. Her grandmother's past, a past filled with secrets and guilt, was finally coming to light. Anna continued, tears in her eyes. "I tried to stop them, but I was just a nurse. They threatened to harm me, to harm your mother. I had to keep their secrets to protect our family." Julie felt a mix of anger and compassion for her grandmother. Anna had carried the burden of the hospital's dark history for decades, all in the name of protecting her family. As they left the hidden room behind, Julie couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The hospital's past had been revealed, and the truth, no matter how horrifying, had come to light. They returned to Anna's home, where the old diary was placed on a shelf, a testament to the secrets of the past. Julie realized that her grandmother's story was a reminder of the courage it took to face the truth, even when it was painful and terrifying. As Julie looked at her grandmother, she knew that Anna's secret was no longer a burden she had to bear alone. They had confronted the hospital's dark history together, and in doing so, had strengthened the bond between them. The nurse's secret had finally been revealed, and Anna could now find some semblance of peace, knowing that her family was there to support her. The burden of the past had been lifted, and they could face the future with a newfound sense of closure and understanding.